So we've managed to extract the URL for our backend server to an environment variable, and that simplifies calls to fetch. But you might have noticed something else. Here in header.view, every time I make a fetch request, I also have to build my request options. And in login.view, I'm doing exactly the same thing. And the other thing I'm going to want to do is on any route that is protected or any component that is protected, I actually want to check to make sure that the user is authenticated before he or she accesses that component. And that seems like a lot of code duplication. And anytime I find myself doing the same thing more than once, something that requires more than 5 or 6 lines of JavaScript, for example, I always ask myself, is there a better way of doing this? And of course there is. So back in my code in the front end, inside the components directory, I'm going to right click on this and create a new file. And the file I'm going to create, I'll just call it security.js. You can call it whatever you want. Now, this is going to be a JavaScript module, and I'm going to need to have access to the store, and I'm also going to need to have access to the router. So I'm going to import those right now. So I'll import, and don't worry about what I'm doing in detail right now. I'll explain it as I go along. I'll import store, and I'm going to import that from /store.js. Okay, so now I have the store. And I'll also get the router. So I'll import router from up one level router /index.js. Okay? Now I have those things available to me. Now I'm going to declare a variable, let, and I'm going to call it security with a capital S. And I'll spell it right, security. I'll let that equal, and then in curly brackets, I'll just define the functions in this JavaScript module that I want to make available to that variable security. So the first one is, let's make sure the user is authenticated. So I'll say as a comment, make sure user is authenticated. And I'll define a function name, require token. That seems like a good one. You can call it whatever you want. I just want to make sure that the token has a value. Then a colon, and I'll define a function. And in there, I just say if store, because I have that available to me now because I've imported it, dot token, if that's exactly equal to an empty string, then I'll router.push to the login screen. Okay? And then I'll return false just to make sure that nothing else happens. So there's my first variable or method available to this JavaScript module. And the next one I'll do is I'll create request options and send them back. This will be creating the request options variable that I use every time I do a post request with fetch. Okay? In get requests, I don't really need them. So request options is the name of the function, and it's a function, and it takes one parameter that I'll call payload. We still need to make our payload in the individual components, of course. And now I just declare a constant, which is headers. And that's equal to new headers, same as before. So now I have a headers variable, and I'll say headers.append, and I'm going to append the content-type, which will be application/JSON, and then headers.append, and I'll append authorization, bearer, space, plus store.token. And of course, this is going to be used only when I need to make a fetch request that requires authentication. Otherwise, I wouldn't be appending this authorization header, but you'll get the idea. And now I just return method post body json.stringify and stringify the parameter I received as a call to this function, which I called payload, and the headers, which of course are headers. There. Now the last thing I want to do is I want to put in an export default security, just to make it easy to import this. Okay? So I've created that JavaScript module. Now, in the next lecture, we'll go and use it in one or two places.